we've really touched on, the current applications, maybe even hinted at some of the future applications of these ceramics. But for just a moment, I kind of want to dive back into the history of ceramics. So we
Yeah, sure.
see in early civilizations like Mesopotamia, China, and India, they all thrived from using ceramics, not just for practical containers, but like tiles, statues, and jewelry. So I wanted to ask you if you knew, how has mankind evolved from porcelains all the way to modern engineering ceramics? And if you want to explain engineering ceramics more, then go for it.
Yeah. So I would even go further back because
Okay,
in,
let's do it.
ceramics have been important to humankind in how we basically went from a nomadic lifestyle into a lifestyle of being able to move around, right? Because humankind learned how to make earthenware, basically molding and firing ceramic bodies around 30,000 BC. And so this fundamentally changed the ability for humans to travel. And it helped being able to make settlements so you could transport and store food. And then, around 8,000 BC, humans started using ceramics in the form of plasters for coating walls. And so it fundamentally changed how we were using it as a building material. And then around 3,500 BC, humans started using clay tablets that they dried in the sun to basically communicate and write on. And so ceramics basically helped enable transportation and communication many thousands of years ago. And I just find that
Wow.
fascinating because it's also doing that today with our iPhone.
Your spark
it's
plugs.
up there.
Yeah,
And our spark plugs, right?
Yeah.
And our jet engines. And so nothing has really changed. These are engineering ceramics
Sure.
back then. But then you mentioned porcelains, and I find that really interesting because, that's a material that, first of all, porcelain originated in China and it was brought to Europe sometime in the late 1300s, but it was in China many hundreds of years BC, first developed. But it was not brought to Europe, and Europeans did not know how to make porcelain until the early 1700s. They could not duplicate how the Kalyn and Feldspar and the microstructure and how to make that translucent material that was also thermal shock resistant as well. And, porcelain is still used today. Porcelain ceramics are used as insulators, and they are considered in engineering ceramic today. And so I would consider porcelain maybe the first engineering ceramic if you use the definition that it is from a very tight material tolerance source, perhaps a purified material, or thinking about the composition of the material and how you process it. So they knew that you had to process it at a high temperature, above 1400 degrees C or so, and that it had to have a very certain chemistry, a certain amount of kaolin and other additives like feldspar to make this. And so to me, I think porcelain might have been the first engineering ceramic. And that's really what we do in engineering ceramics. It's about the composition and then how we process it, and what at the end result is what is the microstructure and what is the properties, and do they meet the application specific properties that we're looking for.
Could you dive a little bit more into, I know you mentioned Kalyn and Feldspar. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? I know those are the components, right, that go into this ceramic, right?
So those are basically the raw materials that you can mine. And so prior to having, like today, I were to design a ceramic or the ceramics that we make at STC, we source from raw materials like aluminum oxide would be a raw material, or yttria, Y2O3. Or magnesia. But back then, you had to mine from naturally occurring clays and minerals that were in the earth. And there wasn't a refining process necessarily to bring out the other materials out of it, the aluminum oxide out of the kaolin, for example. And so that's really the difference there. And there are still ceramics made from clays and minerals that are mined, but many are refined. And that is where a lot of companies like STC, we use refined raw materials.
Oh, that's fascinating. And it's interesting how we've gone through this transition from using these clay materials, which don't have this sort of purified chemical composition, to now where, we have yttria or yttrium-based ceramic systems and aluminum-based ceramic systems where we are being super scientific about what the composition looks like and how we do that.
And I think one of the challenges that the Europeans had is that all kaolins are not the same. A mine of kaolin from one area in the world is different from another part of the world, or even within a region. And so you might have slightly different alumina silica ratios or other potassium oxide or sodium oxide differences in the chemical composition of those kaolins.
That's super interesting. And I didn't think of porcelain as sort of being the first engineering ceramics of sort. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome.
I don't know that all ceramists would agree with me on that.
Sure.
It was very hard to duplicate, and it had a specific microstructure property relationship that it was engineered for their application. Some of it was art and some of it was very utilitarian for whiteware type applications.
Not sure if that was like a bold take. I don't have the expertise for that, but we're all for material science hot takes on this podcast.